So you want to own a tuck shop. Picture it. A small counter tucked into the corner of a school hallway, or a tiny storefront on a residential street corner. Kids lined up clutching coins. Bags of chips, chocolate bars, sweets in jars, cold drinks and a fridge that hums quietly in the background. No fancy equipment. No chefs. No complicated supply chain. Just snacks, small change, and a constant stream of customers who show up every single day without fail. It looks like the easiest business in the world. Low cost to start, high foot traffic built in. Margins that seem obvious. Buy a chocolate bar for one price, sell it for more, repeat that 1,000 times a day. But here's what almost nobody outside this business understands. The tuck shop's real profit doesn't come from where you'd expect. Its biggest threat isn't competition, and its survival depends on rules written by people who've never run one, school boards, health regulators, and local councils who can reshape the entire business overnight. That's only the beginning. The real story starts once you look past the counter. Let's start with what a tuck shop actually sells. On paper, it sells sweets, snacks, and drinks. But structurally, a tuck shop is closer to a micro-retail operation built entirely around convenience and impulse. Nobody plans a special trip to a tuck shop the way they plan a trip to a supermarket. They buy because it's there, because it's fast, and because the alternative, walking somewhere else, costs more time than the item costs in money. That single fact explains almost every decision a tuck shop owner makes, from where they place the sweets to what they choose to stock. Here's why people assume this business prints money. Small items, high volume. A packet of chips might cost a tuck shop owner somewhere between 30 to 50 cents to buy wholesale and sell for $1 or more. A chocolate bar bought in bulk for 40 cents can sell for double that. Multiply a few hundred small transactions like this across a single school day or a single afternoon rush, and the numbers start to look substantial. In markets like South Africa, where small informal shops known as spaza shops function similarly to tuck shops, industry estimates have placed the informal retail sector's total annual turnover in the tens of billions of rand, built almost entirely on exactly this kind of small daily purchase repeated by millions of people. That sounds like an incredibly efficient business. Until you look at what's actually left after the shelves are restocked. The first problem is volume dependency. A tuck shop doesn't make meaningful profit on a single sale. It makes profit on hundreds of small sales stacking on top of each other every single day. A 50-cent profit margin on a chocolate bar means almost nothing if only 20 people walk past your counter. It means something entirely different if 200 do. This is why location is not a preference for this business. It's the entire model. A tuck shop positioned outside a school gate, next to a bus stop, or inside a busy hallway can turn modest margins into real income. The exact same shop, moved 2 streets away, can fail completely, selling the exact same products at the exact same prices. So where does the real money come from if margins per item are so small? The answer is volume plus low overhead, stacked carefully on top of each other. Unlike a restaurant, a tuck shop typically doesn't need trained staff, a kitchen, gas lines, or complex food safety infrastructure for most of what it sells. Many operate from a small kiosk, a converted room, or even a stall, dramatically reducing the fixed costs that crush larger food businesses. Startup costs for a basic tuck shop can be remarkably low compared to almost any other retail food business, often estimated in the low thousands of dollars for stock, a fridge, a counter, and basic shelving, rather than the tens of thousands required to open a cafe or restaurant. This is where the business starts to look genuinely attractive. Low barrier to entry, fast-moving inventory, cash sales, minimal equipment. It's one of the few retail businesses where someone with limited capital can realistically start and see revenue within days, not months. But here's where almost everyone underestimates the hidden costs. Start with spoilage and theft, 2 problems that quietly erode margins in ways that don't show up until you count stock at the end of the month. Small, easily pocketed items, sweets, chocolate, small snack packets, are exactly the kind of inventory most vulnerable to shrinkage, the retail industry's term for stock that disappears without being sold. Industry-wide retail shrinkage estimates in convenience and small-format retail commonly sit in the range of 1 to 3% of total sales, and in high-foot traffic, low-supervision environments like school tuck shops, that number can climb significantly higher. A single unwatched afternoon can undo the profit from dozens of legitimate sales. Then there's the seasonal and schedule dependency that most people never think about until they've lived through it. If your tuck shop operates inside or near a school, your entire revenue calendar is dictated by someone else's schedule. Term time brings steady, predictable traffic. But school holidays, exam periods with reduced hours, and long summer breaks can mean weeks of dramatically reduced income, or none at all. Unlike a restaurant that can adjust its hours or a retailer that can pivot its product line, a school-based tuck shop's entire customer base can vanish for 6 to 8 weeks a year, with fixed costs like rent or storage continuing regardless. And this is where regulation becomes the single biggest risk almost nobody accounts for when they picture this business. In England, the school food standards introduced from 2006 onward, following a broader public push toward healthier school meals, placed direct restrictions on selling chocolate, sweets, and sugary or salty snacks in school vending machines and tuck shops during the school day. Shops that had built their entire model around exactly these products were forced to restructure what they sold almost overnight, often replacing high-margin sweets with lower-margin healthier snacks that customers were sometimes less eager to buy. The Soft Drinks Industry Levy, introduced in the UK in 2018 and commonly known as the sugar tax, added another layer of cost pressure. Drinks above a certain sugar threshold became more expensive to stock, squeezing margins on one of the tuck shop's most reliable sellers. In South Africa, spaza shops face a different but equally powerful set of pressures. Government nutrition guidelines for school feeding schemes, combined with periodic municipal health and safety inspections, mean small shop owners must constantly adapt to rules that change faster than their business plans do. And in recent years, increased competition from larger, better capitalized retail chains entering the same informal retail space has put pressure on the traditional owner-run spaza and tuck shop model, forcing smaller operators to compete on price against businesses with far greater buying power. This is where the real fragility of the tuck shop model becomes visible, not through dramatic bankruptcy headlines like a major retail chain, but through a slow, quiet erosion that rarely makes the news. Consider the broader UK convenience retail sector, tracked closely by the Association of Convenience Stores, whose annual reports have repeatedly highlighted rising business rates, energy costs, and minimum wage increases as consistent pressures squeezing small independent retailers, tuck shops and micro-convenience stores included. Even though tuck shops are smaller and simpler than a full convenience store, they are not exempt from the same rising costs of electricity for refrigeration, insurance, and, where applicable, rent. Energy costs deserve particular attention here because they're easy to overlook in a business this small. A tuck shop's fridge or freezer, essential for cold drinks and any perishable stock, runs continuously every hour of every day, regardless of how many customers walk through the door. During periods of sharp energy price increases, like those seen across Europe and the UK in 2022, small retailers with thin margins reported energy costs eating directly into profit that used to be considered secure. So if the risks are this real, why do tuck shops keep appearing, generation after generation, in schools and neighborhoods everywhere? Because when the fundamentals align, the model genuinely works, and it works with a simplicity few other businesses can match. Look at the traditional British school tuck shop, often run not as a standalone commercial venture but by a school's parent-teacher association, with profits reinvested directly into school equipment, trips, or facilities. In this model, the tuck shop isn't judged purely on profit margin. It's judged on total contribution over a school year, and because labor is frequently volunteer-based, the overhead that crushes commercial food businesses barely applies. Remove paid staff from the equation, and even modest per-item margins compound into meaningful annual totals. Compare that to the standalone commercial tuck shop or spaza shop model, common in South African townships and increasingly across urban centers in India and Southeast Asia, where a single proprietor stocks, sells, and manages the shop personally. Here, the owner's own labor is essentially free from an accounting perspective. Since they're not paying themselves a formal wage, they're taking home whatever's left after stock is replenished. This is precisely why so many of these businesses survive on margins that would bankrupt a formally staffed retail operation. The owner isn't optimizing for a return on invested capital in the way a corporation would. They're optimizing for daily household income, and that changes the entire calculation of what counts as worth it. This distinction matters enormously because it explains why tuck shops rarely show up in headlines about business failure the way restaurants or large retail chains do. They don't carry the debt structures that sink chains like a Cineworld or an AMC. There's no leverage B-out. No shareholder pressure, no multi-million-dollar lease on prime real estate. When a tuck shop fails, it usually doesn't collapse dramatically. It simply quietly closes and often reopens somewhere else, run by someone else, because the barrier to trying again is so low. That low barrier is both the business's greatest strength and its greatest structural weakness. It means competition is nearly frictionless. If a tuck shop near a school gate is making solid money selling snacks at the end of the day, there's very little stopping a second near-identical shop from opening 30 meters away next week. Unlike a restaurant with a distinct concept or a retailer with brand loyalty, a tuck shop's competitive advantage rarely extends beyond convenience and price, both of which are trivially easy for a new entrant to match. So who actually succeeds in this business over the long term? The tuck shops that last tend to share a few consistent traits. They diversify beyond sweets and chips into items with slightly better and more stable margins. Stationery, phone credit top-ups, printing services, or basic household items that don't face the same regulatory scrutiny as sugary snacks. They build relationships with wholesalers that allow for better bulk pricing than a single independent could negotiate alone, sometimes through informal buying groups or cooperative arrangements common among spaza shop owners in South Africa. And critically, they treat location not as a fixed cost to minimize, but as the single most important investment decision of the entire business, understanding that the right spot outside the right school or workplace can outperform a slightly cheaper location with worse foot traffic by a significant margin. The tuck shops that fail tend to make the opposite mistakes. They overestimate how forgiving thin margins can be against real theft and spoilage. They underestimate how quickly regulation can eliminate their best-selling products overnight. And they assume that because the barrier to entry was low for them, it will stay low, forgetting that the same ease of entry that let them start can just as easily let a competitor open next door. So is owning a tuck shop actually worth it? The honest answer depends entirely on what you're optimizing for. As a path to significant wealth, the tuck shop model rarely gets there. The margins are simply too thin and too vulnerable to regulation, theft, and seasonal collapse to scale into anything resembling a large enterprise. But as a low-barrier entry point into business ownership, a source of steady supplementary income, or a genuinely self-sustaining livelihood for a single owner-operator, it remains one of the most accessible and resilient small business models in the world, precisely because it asks for so little to begin. The next time you walk past a tiny counter selling sweets and cold drinks to a line of waiting customers, remember what you're actually looking at. It isn't a simple snack stand. It's a finely balanced economic machine running on razor-thin margins, propped up entirely by volume, vulnerable to a health regulation written in a government office it will never see, and kept alive, day after day, by nothing more than convenience and small change.